Because here's the problem: if archaeologists like 10,000 years from now dig up New York City, does that mean that also Spider-Man existed?
No.
So this atheist tries to debunk Jesus with Spider-Man. So let's get right into it. Shout out to Cliff and give me an answer. Let's go.
Give me another
No,
one.
a pool of Bethesda. We have Bethlehem.
We
have Nazareth. We have Rome. We have Julius Caesar, Tiberius Caesar. We have Pontius Pilate.
Okay,
Archaeological digs have exposed that these people are not made up by the New Testament.
Really quick.
They're in the Roman record.
I have just something I wanted to say specifically about if the Bible says that a certain archaeological site exists and we find it 1,000 years from now, then we are to assume that all the miracles that Jesus did and all those things are true. So if 1,000 years from now...
No, sir.
No, hold on.
That is not my argument.
Hold on.
My argument is not that the miracles occurred. You got to be honest with me. My argument is the New Testament historically reliable?
But things are on a claim by claim basis, because here's the problem: if archaeologists like 10,000 years from now dig up New York City, does that mean that also Spider-Man existed?
No.
No.
Well, they're gonna find comic books of Spider-Man.
If we find this pool that's mentioned in the Bible, does that mean anything about Jesus is true? That he was born from Mary?
That is not my point.
That he was crucified?
You're attacking a straw man. You're doing a very good job. That was not my point. My point was not that because the pool of Bethesda is there, that all that Jesus is said to have done in the New Testament is true. That's not my point.
You're saying
my point is because exactly 4 tests. You take those 4 tests together. The historical evidence is the Gospels are reliable.
So because you find this pool or any other archaeological site that also exists in the Bible, means that we are assuming that all of the New Testament is reliable and true. That is 4 tests.
I had 4 tests. I gave you 4 tests. I said you take those 4 tests together.
Determine? What do they determine?
The historical reliability of the document, the New Testament.
Who made up these tests?
That's what I said. So no, hold on.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. So if we are to assume, okay, so we find these archaeological sites, then that shows the historical accuracy of the entire New Testament, so we can assume the entire thing is true.
No, the Gospels.
Including the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, all the miracles he performed, etc.
Crucifixion.
So you're saying by finding all these archaeological sites, we can assume that Jesus was God and that he did all these things?
No.
Then
the next step is you have to read the New Testament and ask yourself, does the historical evidence of the way he lived, taught, died, and rose from the dead point to his credibility, or does it not? That's what you have to do.
So you're saying that the archaeological evidence contributes to the Bible being reliable, and so if the Bible's reliable and you can use that, then you can use the Bible to say that Jesus is a person.
Well, then you have to read the text and you have to ask yourself, does the text, which is historical in nature, point to the credibility of Christ, or does it not?
I asked a particular
I'm answering your particular question very clearly.
No, he's not.
Why, what did I miss? Tell me what I missed.
I went and I asked. You're using archaeological evidence to prove that the Bible is reliable.
No, it's one of 4 tests.
One of 4.
One of 4 tests that I use on any document. The Quran, the writings of Suetonius or Tacitus.
You got it.
Those are the 4 tests that I use.
All 4 things. So you're saying that this one thing is one of the things that help establish that the Bible is reliable, correct? Just yes or no?
No. The New Testament, guys.
New Testament.
Some people had a problem with me talking about the New Testament. We're sticking with that. The New Testament.
New Testament.
So you're saying that is what is being, so after you prove that the Bible is reliable, then you're using okay, look, the Bible's cool, it matches up, one of the things being archaeological evidence. And then you're saying now since all 4 meet up, we can go and we can look into the validity of Jesus performing miracles and stuff like that.
Okay, I was asked a question, why do you trust the New Testament? My answer is, before I accept any document, be it the New Testament, be it the Quran or whatever, I apply 4 tests. Literary style, archaeological evidence, internal consistency, and archaeological evidence.
What is literary
That is
style
why
have to do
I
with
accept the
anything?
Quran as historically reliable, because the Quran passes those 4 tests. That's why I accept the writings of Josephus, the Jewish historian, as historically reliable, because it passes those 4 tests. Now, if you don't like my tests, no problem, but I just want to hear from you, what are the tests that you use to determine historical reliability?
I still take issue with your claim that if it passes these 4 tests, we can assume the entirety of the New Testament is true. Because you're saying if it passes these 4 tests... That's what you. So the 4 tests are to determine whether or not we can trust the New Testament. That is what you
the
said.
Gospels.
The Gospels, the New
The
Testament.
writings of Paul are...
And they're not listening to anything that Cliff is saying. For anything that you believe in, you have to put on 4 tests to see if it is reliable. And archaeological is one of those tests. If the archaeological writings are completely off, then there's something wrong. You probably shouldn't trust it. Not necessarily that's the only reason, but that should be a red flag.
Historical narrative.
Okay,
They're
okay.
teaching.
All right, so just the Gospels, That's fine. So that's fine.
The
So these
Gospels
4
are the
tests-
historical record of Christ.
So these
Right.
4 tests determine whether or not we can trust the entirety of the Gospels, right?
Yes.
Okay, so again, things are on a claim-by-claim basis. If we are to assume that, or if we see in archaeological digs that we find some place that's in the Bible that's also in the Gospel, and then we find this place, does that prove that we can trust all the Gospel, including the claims that Jesus rose from the dead and that he performed all these miracles, et cetera, et cetera? Because, again, just because, let's say, 10,000 years from now, archaeologists dig up New York, does not mean that we assume that all of a sudden also Spider-Man existed. Things go claim-by-claim basis.
Spider-Man is fictional.
Yeah, and so because of that same logical progression, you're saying the same thing. It's like, okay, we find this archaeological place, and that means that we can trust the entirety of the Gospel, including the claims about Jesus and his divinity and rising from the dead, et cetera, et cetera.
That's not my point.
What's your
You've
point?
missed my point. My point
So,
is,
explain.
the 4 tests that I gave you are not to answer the question, is Jesus God?
They are to determine whether
No.
we can trust the New Testament, or the
You,
Gospel.
they are the 4...
See if
Well,
we
you
can
go
trust
ahead and talk, and when
We
you're
asked
finished,
you
then I'll
what you
answer you,
believe
okay?
and
Go ahead. What's your
why.
point?
How
Well,
does that show that?
So you said, so I just want to make sure that this is correct. You said that the tests are to determine whether or not we can trust the Gospel
As historically reliable.
as historically reliable. Correct. So, and if we can say that it's historically reliable because of archaeology and all the 3 other tests.
Literary style,
Literary style,
internal consistency, archaeological evidence, and manuscript evidence.
Okay.
Very important.
So those 4 tests are to determine that the Gospel is correct. So if it passes these 4 tests, then we can determine that all of the Gospel is correct, not claim by claim, but we can just assume the whole lump sum of it is correct and true and historically accurate.
It passes those tests, so the evidence is it's historically reliable.
Okay, so because of those archaeological digs, because we found some pools somewhere, we are to assume now that Jesus rose from the dead.
I've said it over and over. 4 tests, not 1 test.
I don't think your job right now is to find out what's true because you keep dancing around this wordplay. I think that you're just trying to convert people.
All right. What do you think about Jesus?
I don't think that. I don't even know if he existed, and if he existed, he definitely didn't exist in the way the New Testament says.
Okay, what are you living for, and what's the evidence that whatever it is you're living for is true?
This guy's being very disingenuous. He was saying that at the end of the day, it's not just about archaeological. It's not just about the pool of Shalom existing today. We found it. That we're not saying that proves that Jesus rose from the dead. It's looking at the evidence. Is the evidence showing you that it's more reliable to likely happen or it not? That's what I would say. And it's crazy how he's like, well, I don't know. The evidence, Jesus, we don't even know if he existed. Come on, guys.
What am I living for?
What are you living for, and what's your evidence that whatever it is you're living for is true?
I want to love, live, and enjoy time with friends, family, and.
Okay, what's your evidence that the purpose of human existence is to love, live, and live with family? Why do you do that?
That's assuming that there is some sort of objective source of what everyone ought to do.
No. What it's assuming is that you told me the truth when you said what I'm living for is to live, love, and have a good time with my family. That's
what
all
it
I'm
said to me.
assuming, what you've claimed.
That's a particular claim about myself.
Yeah, so what's the evidence that that's the purpose of human existence, to live, love, and enjoy your family? Why do you do that?
You're jumping and assuming that I think that it's for all of human existence.
He's kind of asking for your existence. That's what he's doing.
Yeah, what's your reason for doing it?
I mean, it's based entirely on opinion. I enjoy it. I enjoy those things. I love people.
Okay. Notice that I never once said, I believe in Jesus because I enjoy it. Instead, I've appealed to an objective historical record, the New Testament Gospels. You read them for yourself, don't take it from me, and ask yourself, does the historical evidence of the way Jesus lived, taught, died, and rose from the dead point to him being a fraud, a charlatan, or does it point to him being reliable?
That's assuming that That is, in fact, the objective source. The
No,
Gospels
it's not
are.
assuming.
Assuming
We've
that.
been going over this. Four
if-
tests to determine the historical
I already
reliability.
talked about your four tests. It does not. We can't just say because we found some pool somewhere that we can also include the divinity of
All
Jesus
right,
Christ.
then you don't like my four tests, so please give me better tests that you use to determine historical reliability of any document.
A lot of the same tests as you, but
Oh! Oh! Thank you for that.
That's crazy how disingenuous he is, or intellectually dishonest, because he's like, oh yeah, I use a lot of the same tests as you do to see if something is historically reliable.
Compliment.
there's a big exception though.
All right, what's the exception?
We go on a claim-by-claim basis. We're not to assume just because what we found. If we find, for example, like for the pool,
Yeah.
that pool. If we find that pool, we can conclude that there was a pool here. Somebody created that pool, and if we find maybe some footprints or something that people bathed in that pool, we aren't to assume, oh, this other document had this pool, so everything in that document must be true.
So that was.
That's for sure, we agree.
It's a claim-by-claim basis.
That's right.
So it's a lot of the same test, but it's on a claim-by-claim basis.
Fine. But the evidence is the Gospels are historically reliable, so read them and find out, wait a second, is there mythology mixed in here? Is there parable mixed up in here? Obviously, yes, Jesus spoke in parables at times. So obviously his parables are not historically accurate presentations. He spoke in parables. Obviously he used hyperbole. He said, I tell you the truth, unless you hate your father and mother, your wife and children, you cannot be my disciple. That does Jesus literally in Luke 14 say, I'm to hate him? No. When you read it in context, respecting literary style, you know that that is hyperbole, an extreme form of speech to make a point. So no, I don't accept everything as being literal. I allow a speaker to use hyperbole, metaphor, simile, parable.
Yeah, I never
Right.
disputed that. I'm
Good.
talking about when we are talking, but the claims about Jesus' divinity and the miracles he performed, those are true claims. Those
Yes.
are things that you'd have to have evidence for.
You bet.
And I also have the question, if God's concern was to save as many people as possible, I don't know why he wouldn't wait until we developed the technologies of cellular devices and satellites and where we could project this stuff all over the place to save everybody. But with that, I have a paper I have to finish and go to the library and finish.
Such a delight to talk with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
You essentially said earlier that
The thing is, I feel like so many people say, I don't know why he did it at that time. I don't know why it didn't happen now, but would you still believe? No. There's no evidence in the world because you still have to submit to authority.
like God doesn't do certain things because he acts rationally. What
Yes,
defines
yes.
the rationality that he acts
Right.
behind? Yeah, what defines the rationality that he acts
You
behind?
bet.
Is there some like
Reality.
Okay.
It is impossible for God to make a square circle. Why? Because square and circle contradict each other.
So then
It is impossible for God to exist and not to exist in the same way at the same time. You cannot exist and not exist in the same way at the same time. It's impossible. It's contradictory. So God does not dabble in the irrational in contradictions. He doesn't make square circles. He doesn't make 2 + 2 = 5.
yeah,
Go.
so then there's something kind of a little bit deeper than God that defines what could be rational and what couldn't be.
Oh, okay. No, I would argue that God created in a rational way. God is eternal, no beginning, no end. And when God created, he created it in an orderly, rational way. So, God did not create the law of gravity to be suspended when I want to jump off the top of that building. No, he created consistently. The law of gravity works. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Okay, that's order.
So then in the context of like some of the miracles, you discussed some yesterday, like splitting of the sea and whatnot.
Yes.
So if his intervention there kind of goes against what is rational, then
Good.
what gives that more credence or more believability than something like also what was discussed yesterday, like some of the more fantastical aspects of mythology?
You bet. Great question. All right, the splitting of the Red Sea or any other miracle is based on the idea that a supernatural God created the laws of nature. But the God who created those laws of nature can change them. And that's what a miracle is. God intervening and changing a law of nature. That all of a sudden the Red Sea is split. All of a sudden Jesus turns water into wine. All of a sudden Jesus walks on water. That is a changing of the natural law that God created.
And wouldn't that contradict the whole idea that he's bound by rationality, or
Okay.
that he acts solely rationally, or not necessarily solely rationally,
Right.
but that he acts rationally?
I would argue, when you look at the miracles that Jesus performed, you'll notice that they're very reasonable. Meaning by that, he feeds hungry people by taking 5 loaves and 2 fish and multiplying them. He heals a blind man by opening his eyes. God splits the Red Sea in order to save the Jewish nation from being wiped out by the Egyptians. So when you look at the miracles of Jesus and the miracles of God in the Bible, they're not irrational, they're very reasonable in that they are designed to preserve life, to save life, to promote life.
If you believe that God created the heavens and the earth, or something came from nothing, you have to admit that any miracle can be done.
Someone can have their different moral absolutes, and you can have your logical arguments about which morality is better, but of course, they may have different definitions of why a certain morality would be better than another. Like, is human life actually valuable versus if it isn't? Because if those two people try to argue the moralities, they're never going to be able to have a proper argument. They're going to keep cycling over whether or not human life is valuable. So what I'm getting at is, you can have absolutes and, believe your absolutes are the absolute as a moral relativist and not be hypocritical.
Okay? We disagree.
Oh, yeah, and I'm glad we were able to.
My Muslim friends are convinced you can have more than one wife. That's a moral absolute. I have no problem with their understanding it's absolute because God, Allah, has declared that I'm allowed to have more than one wife. My disagreement with my Muslim friends is I don't trust your source of information about God the way I trust Jesus Christ. I think the evidence is that Jesus is more reliable than Muhammad. My argument with my Muslim friends is not, you have no basis for a moral absolute. No, baloney, they do. They believe in Allah. Allah says it. Eternal mind, prior to the human mind, decrees this. They're being intellectually consistent. But my atheist friend who says there are moral absolutes, they're being intellectually inconsistent. I'm convinced. Because if there is no God, then it's the human mind that creates and defines right and wrong. Which means I'm not right and you're not wrong, you're not right and I'm not wrong. It's all relative.
Right, and I guess, so as a relativist, I would argue that, humans' ability to come up with their morals could be on the same level as a potential God if one were to exist or not, if that makes sense. And
No, it does make sense.
That's where the relativist part
You're a
comes in.
great guy and I'm not being to attack
Oh yeah,
you.
no, not at all.
But that line of thought, sir, I am convinced, is the heart of sin.
And that's fair, yeah.
That's what Adam and Eve did. Adam and Eve said, God, your definition of right and wrong, unacceptable. We will define right and wrong. In other words, I'm convinced that moral relativism is the quickest way to deify my opinion. My opinion is right. Everybody who disagrees with me is wrong. I am standing here saying that is an example of the height of human arrogance. So a Christian is not someone who says, I am brilliant, my definition is right. A Christian is someone who says, God, the eternal being, has created values of justice, integrity, compassion, and love. He's given us consciences and rational minds, and we are responsible to accept his definition of right and wrong, not create our own definitions.
Right, I guess you're past
Dan says, atheists don't believe in virgin birth, but believe in the virgin birth of the universe. I reckon it takes more faith to believe that.
responsibility of the morals creation to an omnipotent being that may or may not exist, right? Whereas somebody who doesn't believe in a God, they're saying that their morality is coming from themselves. At the end of the day, there's still my moral my morals, those are the right ones, those are the definite ones, versus yours are not. Now, y'all use a God to justify. I use humans as our ability to come up with a good moral system and our ability to work it out.
And if in reality I have created God to justify my own morality, shame on me. And
agree to disagree at the end, I guess.
If I am simply creating God in my own image to justify my own opinions, my own system of morality, shame on me. That is incredible arrogance on my part.
And when I said you, I didn't mean you specifically. I meant like way back when the book was originally written,
right?
Whether or not there was a God or if some guy wrote it all out and was a really good writer.
You bet.
And we can agree to disagree at the end, but that was I guess the point I was trying to shoot for since yesterday. I've been thinking about it all day, trying to get to that point where I'm just saying, you know, one person says God's where it comes from, another person says where people come.
Okay, Corp says, think of a lump of cookie dough in an oven. The lump didn't explode. It just expanded and changed into a cookie. Well, that's not the Big Bang. But where did the lump come from then? And how in the world would this expand? What set the expansion into motion?
And at the end of the day, that's relevant. I mean, yeah, the morality is relevant because, you know, how you're going to get that across, either logical argument, violence, however, you know, that's how you get people to...
Right, but in reality, if there is no God, morality is relative. In reality, if there is a God, then there are possibly moral absolutes, and that's obviously what Jesus Christ taught.
Corpse, think about this. In order for a cookie to expand, you have to have the right ingredients. You have to have baking soda. You have to have baking powder or yeast, but most likely baking soda or baking powder in order for things to expand. You have to have the right ingredients. Someone put those ingredients into that cookie in order for it to grow. And just like that, I would say there has to be a creator for something to change. Something has to be designed and put into motion. Shout out to all the bakers out there.
Cool. Well, can I shake your hand real quick?
You bet. Good to see you again.
I was ready to reach that conclusion. I was thinking about it all day, trying to get there. It's awesome.
Thanks for your
time.
I would say our morality or our improvement morally has drastically increased during the 21st century. And from the perspective of somebody that's religious, they're all the same. But from the perspective of if murder is worse than lying, we have made an incredible improvement in society. And it's not even close to compare them at all.
Okay, what century had more murders than any other century throughout human history?
I couldn't tell you.
It's easy. 20th century. Right? You put Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong, Adolf Hitler, and Pol Pot together. There has never been a century that has had anywhere near the amount of bloodshed and murder that the 20th century had. H.G. Wells thought, human beings are getting better and better.
Okay.
Science and technology, we're improving as a human race.
Okay.
World War I came along, but World War I was the war to end all wars. We're still going to get better. But then World War II came along, and H.G. Wells, this brilliant humanist, saw the return of genocide, slaughtering Jews on a scale that was incredible. And he wrote a book called The Fate of Man. And in this book, H.G. Wells writes, my faith in man is bankrupt because I have watched the most highly technological, highly scientific, highly educated nation of the world, Nazi Germany, destroy human life on a scale that is scary. See, that type of honesty I like. To argue that the human beings, we can get it better on our own, yeah, we can go forward some, and then we slip back, and the 20th century, sir, was so much worse than the 19th, 18th, 17th, 15th, 16th centuries. Is incredible. So let's be honest. Human beings are good at times, and human beings are atrocious at other times. We're all mixed up kids. That's why we all need help. And that's what Jesus Christ offers. Forgiveness, moral strength to become better with his help than we can on our own. That's why a follower of Christ takes Jesus so seriously.
Yeah, amen. And I'm sorry, but in the 20th century had to be the biggest rise of atheism and secular humanism more than ever before. And when you really think about it, if that also came the rise of human beings kind of lose their value. If we're no better or greater than any other animal and we already kill all the other animals, what's the difference for killing a human being? You know? Technology definitely played a big part, obviously, because it gave us the opportunity to go all the way across the world in a day. Romans 1:26 says, "That is why God abandoned them to their shameful desires. Even the woman turned against the natural way of to have sex and instead indulged in sex with each other." So guys, I encourage you to go to Jesus today. Know that he loves you and he's longing to have a relationship with you. I want you to put him first above all else. Description below, you'll be able to click a link to help you to decide to follow Jesus for the first time. I promise you it will be the best decision of your entire life. If you're